The 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education U.S. Supreme Court decision was really one of the landmark decisions in the civil rights movement, and really sort of sets off this larger movement that African Americans have been struggling for since emancipation in 1863. Yesterday in class we looked at this map, and this shows educational segregation in the United States. The states you see here in red, really from the border of our state here in Pennsylvania all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, where Texas is, these are the states where educational segregation was required. So white students and non-white students would not attend school together because it was not legal for them to attend school together. In some states it was optional, and one state where it was optional is right here in the heartland of America, Kansas, and that's where our story of Brown versus the Board of Education begins. As we switch over to Google Earth here, we're going to zoom in on the city of Topeka, Kansas. Topeka was a unique city in the 1950s in that a population of about 80,000 people and a population of about 7,000 African Americans. And the African Americans that lived in Topeka, they would have experienced racism, they would have experienced segregation, but it may not have been on the same level as some of the other southern cities that we're going to talk about throughout our civil rights unit. For instance, in Topeka, African American and white riders on buses were allowed to sit together. That's not going to be the case in some other cities. But the segregation that we saw in Topeka was consistent in that we saw at times whites and non-whites were separated from one another. And a great example of this was in the school system of Topeka, Kansas. Their high schools were integrated. So African American and white students went to school together, but they were not allowed to sit together in the cafeteria. When it came to sports teams, there would be a white basketball team and there would be an African American basketball team. And this was sort of a legacy of segregation that had been part of the Kansas school system since the 1870s. And really this became an issue in 1951 when some people started to question it, and they realized that the white schools were getting new buildings built or being renovated and repaired, and the African American schools were just falling into degradation. And that's really where the case against the school board of Topeka, Kansas started. But by 1954, we started to see some individual cases that were going to be brought to the attention of the United States of America to show just how bad things really were. And that's where we start with Linda Brown. Linda Brown was a 7-year-old girl who lived in Topeka, Kansas. In particular, I'm zooming in on the neighborhood where Linda Brown grew up. And Linda Brown grew up in a very racially diverse neighborhood. There would be white children, there would be African American children, there would be Latino children, and they all kind of grew up together. In 1954, they built a new elementary school. It was called Sumner Elementary School. And in 1954, when Linda Brown was going into first grade, her father took her to the school to enroll. She was told that she could not attend that school because she was an African American child. Linda Brown was clearly upset by this. She would not be allowed to go to school with her friends. This was the community in which she had grown up in, and schools are supposed to be part of our community. They really become part of our identity and who we are. And in Linda Brown's case, not only would she not be allowed to attend Sumner Elementary School, she was going to have to attend one of the 4 schools that were for African American children. The school that she would be attending was called Monroe Elementary School. Monroe Elementary School was located on the other side of Topeka, Kansas from where Linda Brown lived. Now, that was going to be a bit of a problem, but the bigger problem was this. Monroe Elementary School was a far inferior school to Sumner Elementary School. A lot of these segregated schools, like you see in the picture here, they would not have heat in the winter. They would not have a principal. They would not have a cafeteria, and a lot of times these were old 1- or 2-room schoolhouses that had been built over 100 years ago. That was a bit of a problem, but the real problem in this case involved how and what Linda Brown had to do to get to this far inferior school. So going back to Linda Brown's house over here on the north side of Topeka, Kansas, Linda Brown would now have to go from her house and get on a bus to get over to the Monroe Elementary School. She would have to walk a mile to catch this bus because no other students in this neighborhood were being bused to Monroe. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? I take a bus to school. Well, it's a big deal if you're a 7-year-old girl and you have to walk over a mile to catch that bus. In particular, if one of the things that you have to walk through is this. The Rock Island was a railroad that ran from Chicago to Texas, and in Topeka they had their major switch yard. This is where freight trains that would be moving from north to south would come, and they would swap cars out and pick other cars up. Really, it was a logistical nightmare, and it's not exactly the place you would want a child to walk through. The Rock Island switchyard doesn't look exactly like it did in that picture just there, but if we go down to the ground level here, you can kind of get an idea of just how massive of a logistical transportation and infrastructure a freight yard is. And as we sort of pan over here to the left and to the right, you can see all of those tracks, you can see the cars, you can see the engines. And you have to remember that this is today. In the 1950s, there would not have been graded crossings like you have here. There would not have been railway lights or gates to indicate that trains were coming. And really, this was quite dangerous for a 7-year-old girl to walk through just to catch a bus. Not to mention, by the time that she got to her bus stop, the bus might be late. Oftentimes she would stand out there in the rain, in the cold, or in the snow until the bus came. And the question really became why? Why is a 7-year-old girl going through these conditions, going through these hardships, just to get an education? And that was the issue that was at the heart of Brown versus the Board of Education. Was separate but equal really creating equal opportunities in the United States of America for children of African American descent? Why could Linda Brown not go to the school that was in her neighborhood? Because under every provision as an American citizen, this is something that should have been an opportunity for her to do. And really, that is what we create. And that's why we see Brown versus the Board of Education being such an important case into the struggle for equality here in the United States of America. Until next time.